I always have projects in the works. There are still 7 unpublished books that will be published over the next few years. I'm always writing blogs and noodling new novels. My head is always filled with stories. So as long as I'm able and my memory holds, and it seems to be holding pretty good at the age of 89, I will continue to create literary works.
This is the Book of Life. I'm Heidi Rabinowitz. Warren Adler's career includes over 50 books and a number of plays and films. One of his best-known works is The War of the Roses, a book that became a movie with Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner. But one of his most beloved and most Jewish works is The Sunset Gang, a book that became a TV series that became a musical about a retirement village in Florida. We'll listen to a clip from the forthcoming audiobook before diving into Mr. Adler's own comments. He asked me to send him questions, and he recorded his answers for me, so it's a one-man show today. Enjoy, and be sure to visit bookoflifepodcast.com for links to more about Warren Adler.
The Sunset Gang by Warren Adler, narrated by Colleen Crimmins. Yiddish. When it was first organized, the Sunset Village Yiddish Club met once a week. Members talked in Yiddish, read passages from Yiddish papers to each other, and discussed in Yiddish the works of Sholem Aleichem and Isaac Bashevis Singer that they read during the week, in the original Yiddish, of course. The members enjoyed it so much that they would sometimes stay in the all-purpose room in the Sunset Village Clubhouse, where the meetings were held, for hours after they were over, talking in Yiddish as if that language were the only logical form of communication.
This is based upon my parents, who were at Century Village in West Palm Beach, Florida. And Century Village was filled with mostly Jewish residents, mostly lower middle class, like my parents. My father was caught in the Depression, mostly unemployed. We lived at my grandmother's house. When I visited them, it was in the 70s. It was a rich panorama of very, very interesting people. And I authored 15 stories. I've never lived in a Florida retirement village. I never lived in Florida. I visited frequently because my uncles owned restaurants there. And I honeymooned in Miami in 1951 because one of my uncles owned a small hotel. So I knew the whole atmosphere of Florida. In terms of research, I didn't have to do any research. I had observed these people in action. All I had to do was visit my parents, and there was the whole Megillah waiting for me to put it together as stories. My agent sent it to Viking at the time, run by Tom Ginsberg. And he read the books, and the first thing he did was give it to his aging mother. And his aging mother says, "Tom, you got to publish this book. This is the best book I've ever read." And of course, they published The Sunset Gang. It amazes me that on the very first day it was published, there was a giant snowstorm in Washington, D.C., and we lived in those days in the Washington, D.C. area. Actually, it was Chevy Chase, Maryland. And nobody was driving at all. And there was nobody on the streets. And I looked out the window, and there was a guy trudging up our driveway. And he knocked on the door, and he said, "I have got to get this book for my mother, who lives in Florida." He was not Jewish, which surprised the hell out of me. Of course, I gave him the book, and of course I signed it liberally. I had written 15 stories about the Sunset Gang, and Viking decided to print 10 of them. I don't know why they decided to print 10, but there were 5 left. And a few years later, a small publisher in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where I lived for a dozen years, loved those stories and decided to print not only the 10, but the whole 15 stories. The new title for this book was called Never Too Late for Love. And that, too, is still in print and can be bought on Amazon with all of my 50-odd books as well. Many people have told me that they read them to older people, especially in nursing homes or in places where older people now congregate, because they are so emotional. Even when I occasionally reread them, it's as if I was there and my parents were standing over my shoulder watching me write. I believe that even though they are clearly based on Jews, which is what I know best, that they would be the same type of stories if they were Americans of Italian or German or black descent. Because one of the things about aging, it is a universal process. The amazing thing about this book is it continues to have a life. People are always commenting on it, and it deals with a time when there wasn't much interest in senior life. I hadn't realized that they would meet with such enthusiasm, but they have spawned a PBS trilogy. The adaptation to The Sunset Gang, the 3 one-hour segments, were brilliantly adapted by a terrific writer named Ron Ribman. And the cast was unbelievably talented. There was Doris Roberts, who was nominated for an Emmy. There was Jerry Stiller, Ron Rifkin, Ann Mira, and it was produced, oddly enough, by Linda Lavin. And the reason she produced it was because her 100-year-old father was living in Florida at the time, and she was really inspired by my short stories. I must say, Linda did a fabulous job, and the adaptation was really, really great. I was very friendly when I came to Los Angeles with the widower of Donna Reed, and he asked me to attend the Donna Reed Festival in Denison, Iowa. He wanted me to talk about writing to high school students that would be part of the festival. I was assigned to a motel, and in the motel was another fellow. His name was Larry Brown, or as he's known as L. Russell Brown, who was a songwriter, and he was there teaching high school kids how to write songs. He had written the very famous I'll Tie a Yellow Ribbon Around the Old Oak Tree and many, many other hits. And we got to talking, and I told him about the Sunset Gang, and he said, I'm getting chills from your story, and said to me, you know what we should do? We should write a musical. I'll write the music, and you can write the book and the lyrics. So we took one of the stories, it was the first one, called Yiddish, which was also on the PBS trilogy, and I wrote the book and the lyrics, and he wrote the songs. There were 19 songs. I loved writing it, and it was produced by the Jewish Repertory Theater off-Broadway in Manhattan to excellent reviews. It played for about 4 weeks, which was the way the repertory worked. So we are now reviving the Sunset Gang and are looking for producers to produce a Broadway production, or at least through regional theaters. We've kept it on ice for many years because nobody in those years, this was about 20 years ago, was really interested in older people, especially in this context. It's perfect for today's world.
I didn't know I was poor, but I was happy.
So was I.
Happier than now. I miss my mama. I miss my papa. She dried my tears. He calmed my fears.
I miss my mama. I miss my papa. She heard my cries. He was so wise.
clean floors on Shabbos, new dress for Pesach,
clown hats on Purim, waving candles on a flag.
put a penny in the pushka for those less fortunate than us. Oh God, what happened to that little girl I once was?
She lives inside you, and that little boy in me.
And through this language we can touch them once again. Where are you, Mama?
Where are you, Papa?
Where is the love we felt back
There are three particular books of mine, including The Sunset Gang, which deals head-on with what I believe is the Jewish psyche and the Jewish experience. I wrote a book called Residue about the aftermath of Auschwitz. During that terrible period, the Jewish possessions were sorted out and sent to Berlin, in a place, they called it Canada with a K, where they sorted all the material and all the diamonds and all the pieces of gold and anything valuable. And my story is about a Jewish jeweler who made a deal with an SS man to siphon off some of that riches. A generation later, relatives of the SS man and the Jewish person involved are now in America, and they are trying to get their hands on the 2 or 3 trunks of this material. That's what it's about. The third book that I think is really blatantly Jewish is Funny Boys. Funny Boys is about the Catskill Mountain experience in the 30s. I interviewed every single comedian that was still living when I wrote that book. It's about a tumbler in the Catskills at a time when Murder Incorporated, which was a combination of Jewish gangsters and Italian gangsters, used the Catskills as a kind of summer headquarters. The tumbler falls in love with the young Jewish girl who is the girlfriend of one of the most notorious hitmen ever, who got the electric chair. Pittsburgh Phil Strauss was his name. I used all of the names that were involved in the Catskill Mountains in those days and in the mobs of New York. I can reel them off. Lepke Buchalter, Pittsburgh Phil Strauss, Bugsy Goldstein, all got the electric chair in 1941. These were the Jewish hero gangsters of my time. It's a colorful story. It's a great story, I think, and it'll bring back the golden days of the Catskills. All of my work has only one goal, and that is to find the truth. And I believe that readers, especially Jewish readers, will find what it meant to come here as a Jewish immigrant of the lower middle class aspirations, or they had more, but the people at Sunset Village were really lower middle class, and to tell the truth of that generation as it entered its last chapter.
Books have dedication pages, and libraries have dedication plaques. The Book of Life podcast has dedications too. Here's a dedication for our next episode.
This is Jeff Green, and I'll be joining you soon on the Book of Life podcast, and I'd like to dedicate my episode to Aaron Appelfeld, who, after all, wrote the book that I translated, and that's the reason why I got the prize.
If you enjoy the Book of Life podcast, please become a patron at patreon.com/bookoflife. Leave a review on iTunes or a comment on our blog at bookoflifepodcast.com. You can also like our page at facebook.com/bookoflifepodcast, follow us at twitter.com/bookoflifepod, email us at bookoflifepodcast@gmail.com, or leave us a voicemail at 561-206-2473. The Book of Life is a podcast service of the Feldman Library at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida, at cbiboca.org, and is supported in part by the Association of Jewish Libraries at jewishlibraries.org. Our background music is provided by the Freilach Makers Klezmer String Band. Thanks for listening, and happy reading.